All right, so we left off last time on page 146, the business classes of the shopping cart application. If you remember from last time, what I did, and I put this out there on a folder with today's date on it. Get rid of some of this stuff. I don't need anymore. I don't really need that. But I grabbed the books, the author's copy of the assignment. When I say the assignment, the program that's in chapter 4, the shopping cart application. On this first assignment that you're doing, please listen to this. You don't have to look, but please listen to this. On that first assignment that you're doing, there is no, repeat, there is no database work. So you don't have to worry about doing anything with databases. So again, this is the one from the author. And you'll notice under app code, among other things, under app code, there's cartitem.cs, there's cartitemlist.cs, and there's product.cs. And that's what most of the rest of this chapter is about. All right. Also, if I go to cart as my start page, I don't want cart, I guess I want order. Order as my start page, and I go run the program. You'll see that it does work. I tried to go back and rebuild it myself, and mine didn't look nearly as nice. But notice there's Austin Powers, so if I order 2 Austin Powers and click add to cart, it immediately pushes me over to the cart page. It shows me there's 2 Austin Powers. I can continue shopping and choose something else. So now I've got that stuff in there. I can continue shopping. If I click checkout, it says it hasn't been implemented yet. If I remove an item, it tells me I have to select something to remove. If I select Frankenstein and remove item, boom, it's gone. If I have a bunch of stuff in there and select empty cart, that's all gone. All right. The key thing to realize, and we talked about this before, is this page right here. Again, this drop down is being filled. All right. All the stuff that's in there is basically being filled from the database. And what we've told it to do is we've said we want you to give us all of the different titles. That's what we want you to show, but the thing that we're keying on is that product number. All right, and then once you get that, we're running a select query that's providing the name, the short description, the long description, and the price, and also the image. Does that all make sense? We're not, you won't have that on an assignment, but I just want to make sure that that makes sense to you. All right, so then looking at the code, the first class that's in here, this product class, doesn't look like much. At least to me it doesn't look like much. It says that each product is going to have these 6 fields. You can read them yourselves. When you are working with C#, unlike Java, where we went into Eclipse and had it manually set our getters and setters for us, this does the same thing. By putting that in there, that literally sets up both a get routine and a set routine for you. That's just the syntax that they use. All right. So that's the first one. Then we've got cart item. Again, we're going to go back in just a minute, but I just want to kind of quickly go through this with you. All right. So you'll notice, what do we have here? Well, public class cart item. Public cart item. Does that look familiar to anybody? Does that kind of look like a NOR constructor to you? It does to me. And then we've got cart item, where we're passing in a product and a quantity. Does this look familiar? Again, hopefully it does, because it's very similar to the way that it's done in Java. All right? Where we're passing in a field called product and a field called quantity. All right. Notice that product is of type product. What does that mean? It can hold all that stuff. All right. In other words, that product that they're talking about right here is this product right there. So when you pass in a product, you're passing in a data structure that holds a product ID, a product name, a product short description, a product's long description, the product's unit price, and the product's image file. All right. Plus, all right, the number that we're ordering. In other words, what that looks a lot like to me is what you just saw when we ran this. Looks a lot like this, doesn't it? All right. Again, the product name, the product short description, the product long description, the product price, the quantity, and the image. All right. So then we've got, again, for both of these, we've got getters and setters inside of here, and then we've got add quantity. Well, what does that mean? Think about what this means. I'll show it to you, but think about what it means. First of all, notice it says this dot quantity plus equals quantity, and that should make total sense to you. And if you say it doesn't, well, then let's look at this and then tell me afterwards if it does. All right, right now, if I go to my cart, I'll go and I'll put one Frankenstein, so that's in my cart. I'll continue shopping. All right, I go back to Frankenstein again, and I put in 3. When I click add to cart, what number should be in there? And that's what it is, right? That's the plus equals. Because I want to be able to go back at any time and amend my order. Okay? Now, Mark, I think, had asked about this yesterday in the other class, but I think if I go here, I don't know if it takes this. Doesn't. What's that? They're setting this up. This is a superstore that could conceivably sell to companies. All right. But notice it didn't take a negative number, and it also does not take 501. Okay, just as examples. All right. So that add quantity is doing just that. And then we've got, this is the whole thing, display. Yes. Try it. Okay. So it does, and you could look at that and say that's an error in their logic. And that'd be very simple to fix. I mean, I think you all know this, but when we come in here, we could check the current quantity to see whether or not, you know, after we added it to it, then we could just come in here and say if it's greater than, even set up a constant up at the beginning, if it's greater than 500, disallow it. And actually the way that we should do that, if we're going to do that, is we should check first. We shouldn't allow this to happen. We should use like a temporary variable or something like that in there. But again, these are very contrived requirements. All right, you might say, well, you know, there's what's to say that you won't have a Walmart or somebody that wants to order 1,000 of these because they've got thousands of stores, and this is precluding them from doing that. All right, so you could make a case and say that the requirements are stupid. I think the author just put those requirements in so they were able to put in the field validators. That's all. Oh yeah. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, right. But going along with that, think about it, because it actually does bring up a point. It's something we even talked about last hour. Okay, if I come in there and I'm an individual, so it's Jeff Scott, and I come in there and I start ordering 500 of this and 500 of that, that may also send up security flags for them. You know, they might want to be checking things. At a minimum, they might want to check and say, okay, is this credit card that he's using, is that registered to the same guy who's making out the order? Or is this somebody who's gotten a hold of this person's credit card, and now they're just going to start charging a bunch of stuff? All And this right here, it's not exactly the same, but this is very similar to toString that we have in Java. Doesn't it look pretty similar? We're setting up a string to tell it what to display. Is there anything in that particular class that's right there that doesn't make sense? Again, that, at least to me, looks fairly similar to stuff that we've done already. All right. This looks different. Why? Because it is different. All right. Even in here, when you look, the syntax looks different. And you may or may not remember it, but you have seen the syntax before. When we talked about array lists in Java, we saw the same kind of syntax. Typically, when you are using something in the brackets like that, almost look like the HTML tag brackets, you're working with a collection. All right. So what this says is I'm going to have a list of cart items that are going to, of cart items that are referred to as cart items. Oftentimes you do that. You use the same thing, but you change the caseness. So this is creating a new list. Basically, for lack of better words, this is creating a new shopping cart for the customer. Does that make sense? All right, so you're coming in here and you're doing that. You're setting up a new shopping cart. Now, one thing they're not doing, because we're not in that part of the class yet, but we're assuming that when you're doing this and you go to buy something, it's starting a brand new shopping cart. In other words, if I go and I put something in a shopping cart and I get out and I get back in again, it's forgotten the stuff that was in there. Does that make sense? So there's no session lifetime, or that we're extending the session on it. What this does, literally, is it goes out and it does a count to see how many things we have in our shopping cart. Looking at this picture right here, all right, why would we want to possibly have a count of the things in our shopping cart? It's right in front of you. How about, so when I do this, and I come back again, and I say, go to cart, right now, what's my count? All right? Don't you think that's probably why there's right now that's not in there? Couldn't we put code in there that says you must have an item in order to, you have no items to remove, or the cart is already empty? All right, so one way we can do that is to go back and take a look at the count of the number of items that we have in there. Plus, as we talked about before, if we buy one of something and then we come back later and want to add more, we want to make sure the count is always up to date. All right. And some of the stuff that's in here looks a little hinky. You notice that there is a get and a set, and you go, wait a minute, those gets and sets before you wrote, yeah, those were the generic ones. That just says return what's ever in here, or allow me to pass a value in. Well, now it's a little bit more complex. What this is saying here for return cart item sub-index, all right, is basically saying return the current item that's in the cart, and this is saying set the current item to the cart, to whatever we passed in, to whatever its value is. It's similar to stuff we've done in the past, but it's more complex. The good news is, for right now, you don't have to worry about most of this logic. All right? And we will go over what it says in the book, which probably will do a better job of explaining it than I'm doing right now. All right? The for each, again, what that's saying is cycle through my entire cart. All right? If you find something with that ID, then return it. And if there isn't anything, return null. This is going to allow us to come through here and list the stuff. Now this is where it gets a little, like I said, a little hinky, whatever you want to call it. What they're doing in here is they're coming in, they're saying, okay, cart item list cart equals, this again, it looks really weird. They're saying we've created a brand new session variable that's called cart. All right? And what we're going to do is we're going to grab that brand new session variable and copy it to cart. Copy it to the local copy of it. And then we're going to check to see whether or not the cart's null. Well, the only way it would be null is if that hadn't been done yet. Does that make sense? There's no shopping cart. So they're saying if there is a shopping cart already, return it because there could be values in it. If there's not a shopping cart, so if it's the first time you're going through this, create an existence of the shopping cart. This, hopefully the stuff that's in here makes sense. Add item. All right, it says, well, we got a new cart item. We've given you the product and we've given you the quantity. Add that to the shopping cart. This is what's going to happen when we tell it to remove the item that we've highlighted from the shopping cart. This is what's going to happen when we tell it to empty the shopping cart. Does all that make sense? And that's it for what's in there. So let's take a couple minutes and go back and look at what the author said here as far as what's going on. All right, so where is that? There we go. All right, so again, I gave you a brief little overview, but starting on 146, the business classes of the app. As it says, there are 3 business classes in here. All right, it says, as you can see, the product class is a simple class that only contains those properties. We already saw that. All right, an object of this kind of class is typically referred to as a DTO, a data transfer object. The cart item class, as it says, contains a product property, which is the product object. I already mentioned that to you. And an int, which represents the quantity. All right. It has an overloaded constructor, which lets you create an empty cart object or populate it with whatever you're starting to put in here. All right. It also has methods in it. As mentioned, that first method adds to the quantity property. We already talked about its plus equal, and I already mentioned to you why it's plus equal. All right, so it can keep an up-to-date number for the quantity. The second method, as it says, returns a string containing the quantity and product information formatted in a single line. All right, you'll see that a little bit more later. Finally, the cart item class, as it says, or I'm sorry, the cart item list class is a container class. In effect, it says it is the shopping cart. That's what I tried to say to you. An object created from this class stores and keeps track of the different shopping cart item objects. It also contains a static method called getCart that retrieves, all right, from the session state if one is there. Otherwise, it creates a new one. That's what I just tried showing you. All right. So again, they go through this in more depth. I didn't know if it would make sense to show it to you this way and then look at the code, or show you the code first and then look at this. Those are the 6 members that you saw in the product class. All right, they're taken directly from the names, are the same as the ones in the database. That's a good idea to keep those in jive with one another. All right, so again, if I go back to here and I'll break, and I go back to app data and I go to my Halloween database, all right, and I go to tables, and I go to products, not sure why it's taking so much time today, but it is. All I wanted to show you is that's where it's getting the information from. All right. We'll come back to it in just a minute. Yep, there it was. Of course, as soon as I move it. Product ID, name, short description, long description, etc. So that's where we're getting the information from, the image file. Now, we don't put in there the stuff that we don't need. We don't need to show the customer the quantity on hand. All right. But all the information that we need is what we're putting in there, 6 of those fields. And that's what's explained here. Okay. And they go through and they explain anything that's in here with parens is a method, anything that's in here without parens is a property. So they're all explained. All right. Again, sometimes I think it may help if I just sit there and kind of read it out of the book as I'm showing you the code, but sometimes I think if I put it in my own words, maybe it makes it easier. Maybe it's making it harder to understand. That's not my goal, and if it does, sorry about that. All right, so let's take a look. Starting here on page 148, they show the code for the product class and the cart item class, and it's the actual code itself is on 149. Then on 150 and 151, they show the stuff for the cart item list class. All right. Again, the class represents a product for the user that they can order from the shopping cart app. All right. So when we look at that, it's what we just saw. The other one, as they say, shows the code for the cart item class, which represents one item in the shopping cart. Do you understand the difference? Cart item is a single item that you've chosen. Cart item list is your shopping cart. Does that make sense? And I believe the reason the author used that verbiage, cart item, singular, cart item list, implying plural. All right. And again, they explain what the add quantity is. All right. And they explain the other method, which is kind of like I said, is kind of like a two-string method. And then they say here down towards the bottom, there are two features of this code worth mentioning. First, the cart item and the product class are defined using the auto-implemented properties. And again, if you say, what's that? You already know, but just in case you said you forgot or whatever. Those are the auto-implemented properties right there. All right. Notice with the get and the set, you're passing in a complex data structure into it. All right, an entire product. Second, it says the display method uses the format string to return its value here. Well, remember that when you use the format string, one of the things that you can do is you can tell it what you want it formatted in. So that's going to format it in currency format. Please look at what's on the screen in gray right there. Does that make sense to everybody? Because on your assignment, you're asked to format something in currency format. So you've just seen how you can do it. All right. And again, the corresponding code is shown then in the book on page 149, but it's the stuff we just went over. All right. Then on 150, they talk about the cart item list class, and again, as the author mentions, it's a list of cart item objects. They talk about the count property. Count is like length in some other languages. Shows you how many of them there are. It's a read-only property. So the system goes through and counts the number of items that are in the shopping cart. All right. The second indexer, as it says, is read-only, and it gets a cart item using the product ID that's passed to it. All right. I just want to mention this because it has some things that are here that you may or may not have heard of before. The first one there talks about link. Link is actually an acronym. All right. And it doesn't sound like this is what it would be, but I think it's like line item query. What link is it's a contraption, so it's something that was actually developed by Microsoft. And what link allows you to do, L-I-N-Q, what it allows you to do is to write SQL on non-database objects. You can write it on database objects. You already know how to write regular SQL. But with link, you can use an array and you can cycle through it and basically run the equivalent of SQL queries on an array. All right. You could also do it with other things, but most often it's used with arrays. The syntax is a little different because the select part of the select query goes at the bottom instead of at the top like we're used to. So it looks a little bit different. All right. And the other one talks about Lambda expressions. And no matter what definition I give you of this, it won't be good. So I'm just going to go over to Wikipedia and I'm going to grab theirs. All right, they're saying a lambda expression is synonymous to an anonymous function. Remember anonymous functions from jQuery and anonymous functions from JavaScript? An anonymous function means it's called anonymous because it doesn't have a name. All right? So with an anonymous function, you're going to use it for one of two reasons. Either you're only going to call it once, or you're going to use it as part of an expression. Remember in JavaScript how you can literally use you can use a function like a variable, because technically to JavaScript the function is a variable. That's what they're talking about here. It's a function that's not bound to an identifier. It's anonymous. It doesn't have a name. All right. But the point is, the reason I'm telling you this is you may or may not care. Don't be surprised if you go in for an ID or for an IT interview and they ask you if you know what lambda expressions are. All right. And I would just kind of deflect it by saying, well, I've worked with anonymous functions, and I've worked with anonymous functions both in jQuery and JavaScript, and then mention kind of what I just said, or put it in your own words, or whatever. Yes. It's what? Oh, okay. What that probably is that's Java Beans. Java has a thing called Java Beans. That's a whole other thing to get into at another time. All right, but most programming languages directly or indirectly allow some form of lambda expressions. As JavaScript is getting more powerful, you may not realize that, but it is. Maybe you've heard of products like this, products like Angular. All right, they're coming out with a lot of JavaScript add-ons that allow you to write JavaScript for the server side. And as these products get more and more popular and they get more and more powerful, the use of things like lambda expressions will just increase. So the code for that is shown then on page 151. Then the rest of the chapter, so on 152, there's a little talking, but here they show you the ASPX page for the order page. So this that you see here on page 152 is the stuff that you need in order to create that is what's shown here. Now, there's a few things in here that are new from the last program, so that's what I want to go over. If you notice, for example, I'm going to just highlight the stuff that they talk about and a couple more things. First thing, all right, they used a header section. Remember, header section is an HTML5 type of thing, all right, and they put the banner in there at the top in a header section. The program would still work if you didn't do it, but that's considered better programming form. All right. Second, I'm asking you a question right here. You'll notice, look at this and look at this. What's the difference between that gray line and that gray line? I know one of them says please select the product and the other one doesn't, but what's the difference between this one and this one? Right. This is a HTML client-side control. That's a server-side control. All right. So why is that important? Because this one is static and that one's transient. Does that make sense? So if you've got labels that you're using in a program that could conceivably be changing as the program's running, you want to make sure that you make those ASPS labels or ASPS controls. If there's something that's like this, all right, that if there is something like please select a product, that's never going to change, is it? But this stuff's going to be changing depending on what you pick here in your drop-down list. The name is going to change, the short description, etc. Those are all going to change. So all the ones you see here, these four, those are all ASP.NET controls. This is just an HTML control because it's static. It's not going to change. Right? And that's what the author talks about in here. Also, you can see this. There's the connection string. And when we set it up, if you remember the other day I showed you how to set up the connection string. That's what gets built for you. And when we chose the drop down, if we choose those fields, all right, if I select everything, it'll have them all in there, but we didn't have to select everything. They only wanted the ID, the name, the short description, the long description, the image file, and the unit price. From here, notice that by default it takes every single field and it puts it in brackets. That's kind of a convention that they ripped off from Access. But what that means is it is possible, it's never recommended, but it is possible that you create field names, your database field names, that have blank spaces in them. That's never recommended that you do that, but this will account for it because it puts the stuff in the brackets. All right. It also puts the name of the table for the same reason, because it is possible to have a blank space in the name of the table. And then they chose the order by here. Well, we'd want it because we want it alphabetic in our drop-down list, so that's what that's doing. The other thing that's in here that's new, just so you see this. All right. See where it says CSS class equal validator? Everybody see that? All right. Well, let's just quickly look and see where they got that from. All right. I'm going to go down to styles. And I'm going to go into my main. I think it's in here, but it could be in one of the other ones. No, it's not. So I'm going to go to order. And I'm going to try cart. All right, which says to me that it must be up here. CSS class equal button. As an example, let's see if we can find button. All right, so we are in cart. There's button. So see what they're doing? What they're telling you right here is when you create those ASP.NET controls, if I go in and I create an ASP.NET control in here, so I go in there and I create that button, all right? Well, not that one, but look at this one right here. Look at, would you agree remove cart, or remove item and empty cart are the same size? I think you would. Hopefully you would. So if I go in there and I look, I can see if there's a CSS class that's been set up for them. There is. It's called button. So that'll go out to the particular file that's in here. It'll go out to the cart.css file, and it'll find, oh, that's supposed to be a width of 10 EM. All right. Then when you look at the other one that's in here, we look at cart or continue shopping, and we go over to CSS class. Notice it still says button. Well, how does that work? Well, remember that the button size is actually going to be really set up by the amount of text that you have in there. All right? But empty cart and remove item aren't exactly the same size. All right? We could just manually go in and eyeball it and try to set it up like that too. We could do that. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to set some CSS up for your controls. And then when you do that, all you have to do is basically list that class. All right, so again, that class right there, button, is that class right there. Does that make sense? All right, then they do the same thing on the next couple pages. So there's the code for the order page. And again, not really anything that's new in here, other than when you look, there's the price. There's that toString again. So you can see that it's formatted right there for currency. All right. Now, this is the order page right here for the order.aspx.cs. So let's take a look at what's in here. Do you all understand? Because we looked at it in an earlier chapter. All right, so again, I'm on page 155. Page load is what's going to fire when the page loads into memory. This is again where you do most of your initialization. So what are we doing in here? Well, we're telling it, if it's the first time we're bringing it through here, populate that drop-down list. Otherwise, you don't have to send a request back to the server to tell it to populate the list again. And what this is doing is every single time, this is supposing that we've selected a product. So we're grabbing the product, we're grabbing the name, we're grabbing the short description, we're grabbing the long description, we're grabbing the unit price, and we're grabbing the image. Does all that make sense? All right. Then for get selected product, this is kind of stuff we talked about before, but what this is doing is it's grabbing everything in here, in that data view line. Then it's filtering it out, and it's just giving us the one that we've just selected. And it's producing that one for us. All right? And it's supposing we just selected that product. All right? And when we've got get selected product, okay, it's going to create the new product object and load it with data from the row. So when we get done, what this code for get selected product, that code right there is doing, is it's supposing, for example, I think I stopped the run, so I'm going to start the run up again. Again, I'm trying to run through this with you. Hopefully then it'll make some sense. So that when I go in and I change it from Austin Powers to deranged cat, all right, and you see all that stuff that just filled up. That stuff filled up from right here, from get selected product. All right, add is what you think it would be. We've just clicked the button to add it. Now notice this is where they are doing some validation. If page.isValid. It's not going to make much sense to click the add button if we haven't selected a product and we haven't selected a quantity. Okay? So it says, if the item isn't in the cart, add it. Well, otherwise we have to add to its quantity. You already saw that because we already talked about that. All right? Does this make sense now? Please look at the line I'm mousing over. Does that line make sense to everybody? That's literally saying the equivalent of a go-to. It's like you had a hyperlink there that said cart page. Boom. That's what sends you off. So immediately when you come in here and you say to and you click add to cart, that's what immediately sends you to that page. That's the line that does it. All right. And that's it for the code on that page. Then they give you the code for the cart page. That's really about the last thing that's in the chapter here. This is on page 157. All right. Oh, this is the cart ASPX. I'm sorry. So what's new in here? Well, again, list box. That's how they're filling up the cart. They're putting it into a list box. They didn't have to do it that way. That's how they did it. Does everybody recognize this? Does those two gray lines here, the two there and the one down here, do those gray lines look familiar? Do they kind of look like JavaScript? Because that's in essence, that's what we're doing. Remember, we've got the script stuff in there, and it's doing the obtrusive validation using jQuery. So before it's sending it off to the server, it's making sure that what we put in there is valid. And if it isn't, those error validators that we put in, they'll fire. All right. And finally, they have the code then on 159. This is the code for the cart page. And this is the last page in the chapter. So if we look at this, what are we doing? Again, this is creating an existence of our shopping cart. All right. This is loading, and I like the fact that at least on here the author put in at least a couple of comments. Retrieve the cart object from the session on every postback. So in other words, as we're moving from page to page, we want to be able to have that information make its way from page to page. So we're sticking it in session variables. So as we move from our order page to our cart page, we have that information available to us. All right. It says on initial page load, add cart items to list control. Okay. What does that mean? Add cart items to list control. Okay. Well, in English, what it means is the first time that you run the program, hopefully you saw that. I've already got it running. But the first time that we ran it, right here, that's what it looked like, right? In other words, it filled in the first entry that was in there, Austin Powers, and it grabbed the product name, It grabbed the short description, it grabbed the long description, it grabbed the price, and it gave us this with an empty quantity. That's what that's doing, is it's filling it up. That's only the first time that you go in there and load that's an issue is right here. Remove is just that. All right. It says there, if cart contains item and user has selected an item. Does everybody understand what this second if statement right here means? I mentioned this the other day. What does a selected index of -1 mean? Literally what it means is there's nothing in there. If you've got a drop-down list that's empty, the selected index is going to be -1. If you've got a drop-down list with something in it, the first item is 0, the second item is 1, etc. All right. So what they're saying is, you said you wanted to remove something from the cart. Well, it would be nice to know that there's something in the cart. So we could say, please select an item to remove. All right. But if you've passed all the tests, remove it. All right. Display cart, what is it doing? Remove all items from the list control. All right. Loop through the item and display each item's value. So in other words, what that's doing right here, what this is doing right there, is it's coming in here. Oops. Well, let me put in a few things. Oh, we've got a couple, I guess. I'll put in one more. God knows we all need Freddy. All right. So every time you are here and you click the Add to Cart, what it does is it clears what was in here previously and it repopulates it. All right, by cycling through everything that's currently in your shopping cart item list or your cart item list. That's what it's doing there. That's how it's filling it. That way you've always got the most up-to-date stuff. All right. And if I go in and remove an item, it's doing the same thing because it has to update what's in the cart. And that's what it's doing in here. All right. The checkout they haven't done yet, they're going to do that in a later chapter. All right. So that's it for this chapter. So we have now, finished the first section of the book. We're going to go over the homework in just a second, but when you look here, so we've done these 5 chapters. We're going to do the next 6, not today, of course, but so look at what we're going to go over. Chapter 6, how to use the standard server controls. So it's what we've been doing already, but in much more depth and breadth of coverage. Chapter 7, how to use the validation controls. We've looked at those, but this is a whole chapter on those. Chapter 8, how to work with state cookies and URL encoding. All right. So when you're doing the assignment, because you're asked to do a little bit of stuff with session state, if it confuses you and you go back and look at what was in chapter 4 in the book and you're still confused, you might want to look into chapter 8. Chapter 9, how to create master pages. Chapter 10, themes. Chapter 11, site navigation. So we're going to spend about the same amount of time on there, maybe another week or so, than we spend on this stuff. So about 3 weeks or so. Then when we get to the next stuff, 12 through 17, which is all on databases, we're going to go through that fairly quickly because you're not going to have any homework on it. Then we're going to get into working on some model view controller stuff. All right? So just so you have a little idea of what's coming. Now, for the homework then. You all have a copy, correct? This is the homework. So I'm going to take 10:47, no more than until 10:55. So stop me if I've gone that far. I'm going to try to do it in a few minutes. Okay, it looks long, but there's a lot of pictures in here to show you what you're doing. Please look at the picture right here. Please look at this picture. And if you say that looks a lot like what we did for the future value, it's because it is a lot like what was done for the future value. In fact, one of the things, if you look up on the screen here for just a second, one of the things that you're going to find, do I have a P drive open any place in class? Yeah. Wrong class, fix that. All right, this is a folder with today's date on it, boom. So that's got the same thing that we just went over. That's not the one I want to show you. I wanted to go to homework. I just updated this, and it's also on the P drive already, and it's here, and it's on Blackboard. All right, Blackboard just in zip format, of course. But here's what's in there. The same homework you just saw. And this, styles. So where's that from? That's the same styles that we used for future value. You could probably use most of the same stuff for this assignment because it's very similar in nature. If you want to go back and rewrite your own CSS, go ahead and do that. But if you want to just use this one, you can do that too. Does what I just said make sense? All right. So then going back and actually taking a look then. You're going to create this. Please listen to what I'm going to say. You're going to create this twice. You're going to create this the first time just like we did it in Chapter 1 using a table. Then for the third part of the assignment, you go back and you do it and you strip off all the table stuff and you create it with CSS. Does that make sense? All right. I just want you to go through the process of doing it on your own once. So you'll create quotation 1. Notice I said add a styles folder and styles.css to pretty up the project. That's bringing that file in that I just mentioned to you. All right. So start a new web project. It's a price quotation, so I said call it quotation 01. Add the web form. You can keep the name as default for this, .aspx. This is an H1 element right here, price quotation. If you want to pretty it up or change it up or just use the blue that we had from future value, it'll probably be set already, all right, if you just go and add that. Then add a table. 8 rows, 3 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I think I was off by 1. I don't think there is a row there. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's an empty row, I think, underneath there. But they tell you how to do this. We did this in class as far as creating a table. All right, remember that if you are in here, all right, I can do it. I'll stop the run. All right, but if it doesn't matter which one of these I even bring up, but I'll just bring up the cart one here. If I'm here, if you look on your screen, notice if I'm in source mode, it says tools here. If I'm in design mode, it says table here. Go table, insert table. That's what you're going to do. All right, and I think it's 8 rows and 3 columns, I believe it was. All right. The 8 rows I already showed you, and the 3 columns, there's column 1, there's column 2. Column 3 is to hold the error messages. All right. Then, as it says, add the text and the buttons as shown. This stuff that's right here, please get this into your heads. The word sales price, the word discount percent, the word discount amount, and the word total price. Those 4 can be just non-ASP labels. You can use HTML controls for those. That's fine to do. Of course, all of these controls here and the button will be ASP.NET controls. All right. Then they tell you to adjust the width of the table, so you might want to tweak it a little bit so it somewhat looks like this. All right. Add the text boxes here and here. Add the labels here and here. That's what they tell you to do next. Now, notice step 8, and I bolded it, so I don't want anybody to say, well, I didn't see that. It's bold, and I'm showing you it in here. All right, see that? It says you should use good names. In other words, I don't want this called text box 1, text box 2, label 1, label 2, etc. If you want to use the old-fashioned way of doing it and call this TXT sales price, that's okay. Or if you want to call it text box sales price, that's okay. Be consistent in the way you do it. That's all I'm asking. I don't care really which way you do it, but do it and be consistent in doing it. Test the form to see how it looks and make the adjustments necessary. Then what you're going to do is you're going to come in here and put in an event handler for the calculate button. So you're going to put in code for this. You go, I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. You double click on the button, which brings up the click event. And the code isn't going to be that different from your future value code. In fact, it's easier than the code for the future value code. So what's the code? Just please take a look up here. All right. So what's the discount amount? It's 20%, right? So you figure out what the discount percent is, and based on that, you'll figure out the discount amount. All right. Then add the validators. All right. You want to make both of these required fields right here. And if they're not put in, I just kept it simple. I said all you have to put in here then is, we're up one too far, sorry. Did not go too far. All right, just have it say required field. Add a range validator to the right of each text box. What does that say? The sales price can only be a certain range. The discount percent can only be a certain range. Remember, when you do this, they should both be of type double. So when you go in there and set up the validator, it's a range validator. And if you put in the numbers and you don't change the type, it defaults to string, which means it probably won't work the way you want it to work. We talked about this in class previously. All right? So that's the first one. Then for the second one, you add a second page here, confirmation page. And we add a little more CSS, but now we add a new button here that says confirm. When you click the button, it brings up this page. And it's very much the same stuff, but it explains in here how you create that stuff. All right? Now, what you'll have to do, please look up on the screen here, is for the sales price and discount percent, there should be values in each one of those. Did everybody hear what I just said? There should be a value in this that's valid and a value in this that's valid. If you click calculate and one of those isn't filled in, all right, then you should force the user to stay on this page. And you'll do that by using session state, and that's what's explained on that page, yes. You can set it to 0, but the point is when you go through that, what you're told to do in here is someplace in here, I don't remember where it is, but you are given amounts. Are you in here? In the ranges, you already have amounts that but if you want to default it to and put a 0 in both those, yes, you can. You can default it to what it's shown there if you want to. I don't care if you make it 150 and 25. That's fine. That's how they did it in the future value app that was in the book. So either way is fine. Or you can just leave it blank, whichever way you want to do it. All right, so that's going to be in the C# code that you're going to go in there to check and make sure that the session state has been set. All right, and that's what's shown here. Then in the third one, sorry I went over by a minute, but in the third one, all you do is you take the original one you had here that had almost no CSS in it, you remove the table, and you create it without a table just using CSS. Very similar to the examples we went over in class. Does all that make sense? I'll let you read it as you get time, and if you have questions, just ask. All right? So I went over by a minute. But that's it. So it'll be lab after 11 today. It'll be lab all next week. Java, which is next, I'm going to lecture on chapter 11 today. Java will be lab all next week. PHP, I'm going to lecture first on arrays today. All right, especially I'm thinking Amanda's going to come because she is, I didn't realize this. I don't know if any of you do. I can go to it right now. You probably don't care that much. First of all, if I've never told you this, then I'm even more of an ass than I think I am. And that is that all of you, when you graduate, you're all eligible for not only your diploma, but for 3 certificates. All right? And all you have to do to get those certificates is after you get your transcripts, your final transcripts with all that stuff in there, when you've given your grades, you don't need your degree, but you need transcripts. You can print out an unofficial one. But you have to go in and talk to Tammy upstairs, say, hi, I'm Travis Baker, I'm eligible for these 3 certificates. And you show her your transcripts. She writes down the information, and they'll be mailed to you. You'll get them faster than you'll get your actual degree. All right? But the reason I'm telling you that is one of those certificates that you're eligible for is called web programming. Everybody hear that? Web programming. Guess what? To get the web programming cert, there's no programming class that you need to take. Really, it shouldn't be called web programming because Amanda's in there, and I don't think she even took the 119 class. That's not a slam on her at all. It really isn't. She's very bright. I can tell by the stuff that she's working on in Joomla and what she's done on her own. But she's never done any programming. That's why some of you said when I went over the stuff in PHP, and you kind of went over that slowly, it was meant to be review for her, but it was the first time she'd heard some of that stuff. That's why with arrays 2 today, because arrays are a little bit more problematic, all right, because they're a data structure, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that today. But after today in the PHP class, we've now gone over then the first 7 chapters that are in your book. All right? They never heard, yeah. You should, and again, if you say you just confused the hell out of me. Wouldn't be the first time probably that I've confused somebody. But again, if you just go into the school's website, so if you just go out to blackhawk.edu, if you want to see what they are, okay, you go to, there's other ways of getting there, but I'm going to go to Explore Programs, Alphabetic List. All right? And if I work my way down here, all right, you'll notice Java Developer Certificate, .NET Developer Certificate, Web Programming Certificate. So if I go to Java Developer, what is it? The JavaScript class, the .NET class, the Intro to Java, and the Advanced Java. You'll have all taken those. All right, so that's one cert everybody in this room will be able to get. The next one, the .NET Developer. What is that? Well, that's the JavaScript, the 142 class, the class you're in now, and the class you've already taken. So you're all eligible for that one. All right? So then there's the web programming. This is the one I mentioned. So notice what's in there. There's no 119 class. There's no 119 class in there. So she's already had relational database design, I believe, with Denny. She's already had the 157 class with Arinda. She's already had the 147 class with Denny. So out of these classes that are in here, she has these two with me this semester. So this is a person who's eligible for a certificate that I've never even seen before this semester. I knew who she was because she's the only one who didn't look like any of you. This is why I keep telling them that I want to be teaching more classes in the program. They're thinking, well, it's just because you're just such a tightwad SOB and you want as many hours as you can so you get a lot of overload. Well, that's true too. But I get people who come in that have had 5 or 6 classes and have never had me for a class before. And I assume a certain knowledge base, and if they haven't had me for those classes, they may not have that knowledge base. That's why I ask you guys, did Arinda go over this with you? Did so-and-so go over this with you? Because if they didn't, I feel that I really should go over it with you. Yeah, you did. You know, I had you for the class. Yeah, you went over it.